Alright guys, we're going to continue with our 7-2 notes video with page 6 here, and we're going to remind ourselves, after learning about the refreshing the zero product property. Last video we had factors that were already given to you in its factored form. Here we're just going to remind ourselves of how we factor, including how we factor out a GCF, in this case that will always contain a variable. Okay. So at the top here it says we have this equation, x to the third minus 5x squared plus 6 equals 0. And it said it was correctly solved by factoring. Read through the work. So if we look here, first of all, it is already set equal to 0, so that's good. Let's take a look at the first step. What looks like is happening is they factored out a GCF. So if we factored out the GCF, in this case, the GCF was just an x, okay? So the way we like talking about factoring out a GCF is we have to look to see if all of the coefficients, in this case a 1x to the third, 5 and 6 are all divisible by the same number. They are not. So there's not going to be a numerical portion or part to our GCF. If each of the terms of our polynomial contains a variable, we have to factor out at least one variable as our GCF. And how many are determined by kind of the lowest exponent we see. So we have an x to the third, an x squared, and just an x to the first here. The lowest of those three exponents is an x to the first, so that becomes our GCF. Okay? Let's say this said x to the fifth, x to the fourth, and x to the third. Well, we would have factored out an x to the third. Okay? Okay, so we factored out our GCF. How did we figure out what remained of our terms after that? It's really by division, right? Or divide all of those terms by x, the GCF, and that's what's going to be left. A lot of our students forget to leave that GCF there on the outside. It somehow disappears, so let's not make that mistake. The next thing it looked like they did is they took their now trinomial here with a squared, an x, and a constant, and they factored the trinomial. When we factor a trinomial, as long as it factors, it will factor into two binomials. And here are the two binomials. How do we do? Remember, guess and check, right? The first two terms would have to multiply to be x squared. That makes this pretty easy. The last two terms have to multiply to be a positive 6. So you really had two choices there, 6 and 1, 3 and 2. In this case, the 3 and 2 are going to work out for us. We check the middle term. This multiplication, negative 2x, this multiplication, negative 3x, and that checks out. This video isn't to go over factoring again, but again, a quick little refresher. And the last step should be the same thing we just did in our first notes video of 7.2, where we talked about the zero product property. And that video is already factored for us. In this video, it has our factor. We did the factoring. And now that we have them written as factors, we set each, including the GCF, equal to 0. And solve. So we took this factor and set it equal to 0, this factor equal to 0, this factor equal to 0, and there were our three solutions. Again, just like our previous video, we've got our notes, we've got our refresher of factoring and solving. Let's head to that individual practice down below. Think GCF, think factor, go ahead and solve, check in with your teacher when you're done.